watch Terrifier. You know, the horror movie with the clown.
We've got Terrifier at home, little Johnny.
We do?
Yes, the horror movie with the clown. I'll pop it in for you. Let's give it a watch. Today we're talking about the Terrifier that you've got at home, or Terrifier's forgotten cousin. If Stephen King's It is Miley Cyrus,
the journey is usually the part that you remember anyways.
The Jester would be Trace Cyrus.
Who?
The movie came out in 2023, and you probably haven't heard of it.
What the fuck is a jester?
You can kind of think of it as Terrifier's less scary and handicapped cousin, but it's not all bad. This movie has some redeeming qualities. Surprisingly, I did not expect that, especially based on the reviews. You see this friendly bald fella? His name is John. You can tell by his name tag.
Good morning, John. It is often important to know what kind of disease a person has.
The Jester follows him closely behind, close enough to know that he isn't wearing any deodorant. The Jester and John, they go way back. You'll never find out why or how, but they do, okay? And it's very important. John finds a little girl just hanging out. She vanishes and then reappears and vanishes again. Turns out it's the ghost of his deceased daughter. Just kidding, he calls her. She's very much alive. He's seeing a ghost of a girl that's still living. He's having weird visions of her as a kid. Whatever. Maybe the Jester's doing this, you know, haunting him with these visions. John calls her and apologizes for some past wrongdoing. Apparently he abandoned her as a child. We'll talk more about that later. She hangs up on him as the Jester approaches him from behind. The Jester isn't too fond of John. He doesn't want to hang out anymore. He wants John to hang out by himself, quite literally. The Jester's mask looks like it cost $14.99 at your local Walmart, which kind of sucks because otherwise I think it's a pretty cool look. I like the Jester's costume colors. I like the black on orange. I like the top hat and the cane. I just wish his mask wasn't so cheap looking. They kind of utilize the cheapness of the mask later on in the movie because it fools people into believing that he's just some dude wearing a mask.
Who's that?
Some asshole in a cheap suit.
Because this movie takes place on Halloween. That's right. If the orange and black didn't give it away, it's a Halloween movie, spooky movie for spooky month. Look at the picture they chose for John's funeral. They didn't have a better picture of this dude.
Couldn't have found a better photo of this guy.
Emma, John's daughter, that doesn't like him very much, shows up at the service. Later, she calls her mother, and it's very apparent that she very much dislikes John.
How was it?
Fine. I mean...
While on the phone, she sees the Jester dancing next to John's casket, like he's a Fortnite character doing the gritty on someone's dead body. The Jester peers at Emma from behind a tree, very inconspicuous, in his bright-ass orange suit. The two guys responsible for burying the coffin, their names are Jimmy and Paul, are harassed by the Jester for God knows what reason. Jimmy falls over out of nowhere with a jump scare sound and hits his head.
I'm falling.
We find out the Jester tied his shoelaces together. Very rude. He lifts Jimmy's head to reveal the devastating injury. Oh my God, it looks so realistic. It looks like shit. If they couldn't afford to make a realistic looking wound, then why show the wound in the first place? You know what I mean? Like,
You fucking drop him.
it looks like they squirted ketchup on his face. Is that ketchup or fruit punch? It's hard to tell. Paul attempts to call the police, but the Jester magically makes an apple force itself out of the man's throat and mouth. Because he was eating an apple earlier. It's very funny. So yeah, this Jester is kind of a dickhead, huh? Just kills random people for no reason because he's bored. Emma and Jocelyn meet up at a bar. Jocelyn is Emma's stepsister. They begin to bond a little bit, and then Jocelyn gives Emma a picture of her when she was younger. In the picture, she's standing next to John. Apparently this picture was on John's person when he died, so he was racked with guilt about their failed relationship or something, and I guess he waited a long time to mend things. Emma is extremely bitter that her dad abandoned her when she was little. Not sure why Jocelyn thought that Emma would be super stoked to get a picture of her with her dad. Shouldn't Jocelyn know how her sister feels about her father? That's one way to ruin the mood. This is a weird thing to point out, but listen to the sound effect of the bartender Frank handing Jocelyn a bill and pen. That same sound effect plays again a second later for no reason. and it really bothers me. It's like a editing error or something. A random guy at the bar named Larry knew John when he was living, but not really. He says he worked with him for 15 years, but didn't really know him. This Larry guy isn't very fond of John because he suspects that he had secrets and demons.
That man had secrets, demons.
He never elaborates why, and spoiler alert, we'll never learn why. This Larry guy, he's very normal. He says this in the bar right next to John's daughter, who's actively mourning his death.
What the fuck is wrong with you?
The jester stops Emma on the sidewalk with a deck of cards, and each time the camera cuts to a different angle of him holding the cards, they're spread in his hand differently. She doesn't choose a card, which makes him very upset, so he disappears and reappears in front of her with the cards again. Obviously, she's freaked out by this guy, so she rushes away to a nearby convenience store. I love how the jester stands like a pencil in the distance. Look at that exceptional posture. It's Halloween night and the jester is bored, so he goes for a stroll. He comes across a kid trick-or-treating in a jester costume. They're like the same thing, dude. So the jester takes a liking to him. The kid says trick or treat and holds out his bag of candy. I don't think that's how it works, little bro. You're supposed to go up to a house and say trick or treat, not random people on the sidewalk. The jester magically takes a candy from the boy's ear and places it in his bag. How cute. See, he's not all bad, but then the kid's dickhead older brother approaches, and he's kind of rude. So the jester starts taking candy out of the older brother's bag and starts throwing it into the little kid's bag. It's so funny. This part honestly got a laugh out of me. You're gonna be a jerk, huh? I'm gonna take his candy and put it in your bag. How do you like that, little shit? In the next scene, Jocelyn decides to light up a spliff on Halloween night, of all nights. So whenever she answers the door for the many kids that ask for candy, she'll stink of weed. And what's even worse is that she'll probably eat all the candy herself, you know, because of the munchies. And then her friends show up. The girl that plays Jocelyn, her face kind of reminds me of a cross between Roseanne Pansino, you know, the Nerdy Nummies YouTuber that hates Mr. Beast, and Selena Gomez. You know, if you took those two people and you mixed their faces together, you'd get this actress. Back at the convenience store, the clerk goes through the motions and brings back my traumatic past working at GameStop, asking every customer a million questions. Would you like to pre-order one of these 15 new games coming out?
Nope.
No? Well, of course you don't want to, just like the other 500 people I asked. But let me waste your time and tell you about each one in detail.
Nope.
And after I'm done, how about I pitch you the power-up rewards card?
I can save you 10% if you just...
Nope.
You have to pay for it each month, and nobody on Earth wants to do that. Would you like one? There's absolutely no way it'll benefit you unless you shop here like every other day.
Nope.
The best part is that this guy kind of looks like someone who would work at GameStop. Emma leaves and is confronted by the Halloween asshole again. That's what she calls him.
It's the Halloween asshole.
He's extremely adamant that she pick a card. So she finally gives in, you know. She pulls an ace of diamonds and puts it back in the filthy deck that he probably uses for toilet paper. Just look at that thing. God damn. He shuffles and she pulls another ace of diamonds. Oh my God. She's like, cool trick. She then gives it back with an attitude.
We're done.
That's one way to respond to a harmless street magician, although he was, you know, blatantly harassing her, but he's very cute under that mask though. Just give him a chance. And just forget about the fact that he's clearly stalking you. Jocelyn sees her dad's ghost, gets freaked out, and decides she'd like to go to a festival with her friends. The jester pops up again next to Emma. She's kind of threatened by him, so she threatens him, and in response, he slits his own neck with a piece of glass, only to revive himself a second later and float to his feet. Very cool. You spooked her real good, dude. That was epic and not random at all. The jester just likes to do this stuff, you know, for the lulz. Just bringing us back to that amazing Shane Dawson movie. I gotta say, him slicing his neck didn't look terrible, especially considering how low of a budget that this movie must have had. It shows that they care, and that makes me care, you know? Good on you, Jester. We then cut to the Halloween festival. Jocelyn notices a bunch of strange things in the crowd, like one man wearing her father's jacket that he died wearing, and another guy walking around with a noose around his neck. I guess word got around of John's death, and it inspired a lot of Weirdo cosplayers. Very normal. If someone died tragically in my town, I would definitely go to a Halloween festival cosplaying as them. That's not weird at all. Unless, of course, Jocelyn is just seeing things, which I guess she could be. So the group decides to enter a haunted attraction, kind of like they do in Terrifier. Strangely, they're all of a sudden split up, like almost immediately. How did that happen? When you go into a haunted house as a group, don't you normally like to stay as a group? What kind of a weird group of friends like start sprinting ahead of one another? So Jocelyn is alone. It's to make the movie spookier, I guess, you know. So she has to chase after her friend Maddie, who decided to sprint away. She has some very odd friends. The people in this movie called Jocelyn JC, by the way, so I'll be doing that from here on out. The movie tries to develop these girls by showing us the different ways in which they deal with their father's passing. And for a movie like this, with practically no budget, it's admirable. I like that it's obvious that this movie is trying, even if the acting throughout is mid to awful. Emma finds herself back at the convenience store. She goes there to wash the Jester's blood off of her. If I were her, I would probably Uber home, you know? Especially at this point, you're being stalked by this creepy guy in a clown mask who is seemingly immortal. The police stop by and Emma tries to explain everything to them. Her acting here is atrocious.
I saw a man. Nope.
Hilariously, the Jester enters the convenience store with the cops present. He just doesn't give a fuck. I love it. He walks right up to the police, takes out handcuffs, cuffs himself, flings his hands up, the cuffs vanish and reappear on the cops, cuffing them together. The next part is not nearly as well done though. He jams his hat over one of the cops' heads, and in doing so, the cop's head just disappears, and the editing here is so bad. It's mostly the sudden flickering of the lights and the awkward angle of the camera that made this part not work for me. I do find it hilarious that the cop isn't dead though. It kind of reminds me of The Matrix. Remember when Neo's mouth just all of a sudden started to sew up and then he had nothing but flesh there? It reminds me of that scene. The cop is very confused about, you know, his missing head. I'm not sure how he's still alive, to be honest. His head's just gone. What's not to understand? I like that this movie's trying to be unique. The Jester then starts dancing with the headless man as the music swells. The headless cop's partner shoots at the Jester in a panic and accidentally shoots his friend dead because his missing head didn't kill him. Somehow. The Jester then catches a bullet meant for him, you know, speaking of The Matrix. It's kind of dumb how similar the Jester is to Art the Clown. The only difference being the Jester has a different color palette and uses magical party tricks to kill his victims, which I'm pretty sure Art the Clown has done before anyway. And this movie came out much later than All Hallows Eve and Terrifier, so it kind of feels like a copy-paste, but there are elements here and there that make it different enough. And the main character in Terrifier and this movie happens to be a woman. I don't know. JC gets a vision of her and her father at this festival when she was younger. It plays out right in front of her. It's very strange. This Jester has some pretty crazy powers, and they'll just get crazier. As this is happening, the Jester plays a magic trick with her friend using cups. He lifts one, and under it are all of this guy's teeth, and then his mouth starts to bleed. His reaction to it is pretty funny. The actor obviously tries to pretend like all of his teeth are missing, but it's pretty clear that he's just doing this, you know, with a bunch of blood in his mouth. The Jester pulls up another cup and this guy's dick and balls are under it. I'm just kidding. Well, they are balls, but the ones that go into his head. Yeah, his eyeballs are underneath this next cup. So the eyes on his face obviously disappear and he starts freaking out. Which kind of makes sense. I think most people probably would. The kills are pretty hilarious in this movie sometimes. The Jester then approaches one of JC's friends from behind, breaks her fucking leg with his cane, and the other two girls just kind of stand around instead of running away. Not that they could run away from him, but like, they could at least try. Or like, help your friend? I don't know. I do understand that in real life when things like this happen. People normally stand around in shock like, you know, like deer in headlights, so it might make sense. Although if it were my friend getting their leg broken by some random guy in a clown costume, then I'd like to imagine that I would try and do something to intervene. Emma still decides not to get an Uber. She's just running down the street. Maybe in this universe, Ubers don't exist. Or maybe this is in the past when Ubers weren't a thing, I don't know. She gets a call from her mother who mentions the Jester.
Is my little girl afraid of the Jester?
I really like this scene. Her mother then basically calls her a bitch.
You wouldn't be in this situation if you weren't so difficult all the time. You're not a very likable person.
And then the Jester pops up again, and we find out that the Jester is the one talking over the phone with her mother's voice.
A little more smiling goes a long, long way.
It's not a bad idea in my opinion. It's a clever way to keep the Jester silent, but also allow the Jester and Emma to communicate. So hats off to this movie. Very cool. I did like this scene. Emma then finds her father on the same bridge where he killed himself. People just get constant visions in this movie. He tells her it's basically her fault that he's dead, as if he committed suicide when it was the Jester that killed him in the first place. I get that this isn't actually her father, it's just the Jester talking to her through a vision of her father. And Emma should realize this after the phone call with her mother when the Jester was talking for her mother, right? Like, put two and two together. The ghost of John puts a noose around Emma's neck. She flops off the bridge and wakes up in a graveyard. She finds younger JC there, and she bullies Emma for a bit before vanishing.
He said you were a mistake.
Emma is beckoned by the Jester, so she enters a nearby door. Inside, she gets a glimpse of John and her sister cutting pumpkins, which presumably happened in the past during a previous Halloween. That same goofy pic of John is in this room, by the way. They just love reusing it. It's the only picture of him. This vision of John tells Emma that she was a plague on his life, the daughter that he never wanted.
I just didn't want you.
But he just had to live with. Of course, this isn't true. It's just the Jester being a dickhead like usual. He's tormenting her, using visions of her family to do so. I'm impressed by this movie's family dynamic and how they utilize it to torture the characters. I definitely wasn't expecting that from a low-budget horror movie with scores like this on Rotten Tomatoes, so it's a nice surprise. If the acting was much better, then I think this movie could have been something. So the Jester basically tricks Emma into stabbing JC.
You're not real.
I guess the Jester was trying to teach Emma a lesson on empathy all along, and in the process murdered a lot of random innocent people.
Unbelievable.
I know I'm a tricksy little murderer, but you should learn to be nicer. JC survived the stab wound, by the way, and now the sisters have a renewed and beautiful relationship. Emma is a changed person now. Thanks, Jester. I wish this movie explained why the Jester exists in the first place. Not that they have to explain that. At the very least, I was expecting some sort of explanation as to why the Jester was involved with John in the first place. Like, did he summon the Jester? Like, what the hell happened? They say in the beginning that John had secrets, but that's all the explanation we get. I'm guessing he summoned him somehow or did something to create the Jester. Maybe the Jester was meant to be the manifestation of malice brought on by John and Emma's awful relationship, and all the surrounding deaths were meant to reflect how the hate you carry impacts those around you, or something. You know, to the extreme. If the acting, effects, and Jester mask were a little better, well, a lot better, I think this could have been a really good low-budget horror movie. They should have replaced the mask with good makeup. Either that or like use makeup to fuse the masks to his face and change those teeth because the teeth on the mask look terrible. Making the Jester look more real would have made him scarier, which would have made the movie more terrifying. But I get it's a movie on Halloween, and they wanted to trick people with him, so, you know, it had to look like a shitty Halloween mask. I don't know. They could have easily gotten around that by just making him put a Halloween mask on top of a scary looking face that looks like a Jester face. That would have worked. Either way, I expected much worse. The movie doesn't overstay its welcome. It has a pretty short runtime, and some of the kills were clever and funny. It's definitely not up there with the likes of Terrifier, but it's definitely not one of the worst horror movies I've ever seen, and I had fun watching it. So overall, hey, it's not bad. See you guys in the next one. Goodbye.